was a rumble in the jungle once. I heard Dad was outside again counting birds, and Mama plugged in a nightlight, and I saw the queen of the world. Mama plugged in
Hello and welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host, Liz.
And I'm your other co-host, Natalie. And tonight we have my friend on, Alissa. So
Hi.
if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your family, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So like Natalie said, my name is Alissa Schwartz, and my sister-in-law, Hannah, was one of the first guests on this podcast and is actually how I know Natalie. We were fortunate enough to both be in Hannah's wedding and get to celebrate all of the joy that encompasses.
Yeah.
But my family, so I am married to Hannah's brother, John, and we have been together for almost 10 years now, married for just about 5. And so we met in college and semi-love at first sight. I liked him a lot more than he liked me. But very fortunate that we started dating and that love blossomed and we are here where we are today. But we have 2 beautiful boys, Emmett, who will be 3 in November, and Reed, who is 1.5. And then we have a cute little fur baby, Sunny, our golden retriever. So that is our family.
Yeah. Awesome. It's a cute name.
Thank you. Her real name's Sunday. And then it just got shortened to Sunny, but
Like the day of the week?
yeah, the day of the week. It's when we were filling out like her papers. When you name like a dog with AKC, you have to have a name that like no other dog has been named that's registered. So her full name is Easy like Sunday morning, and then Sunday Sunny. Like, so yeah, she's just our little Sunny Roo.
That's a really good song. Oh, I love it.
Okay.
So if you want to go ahead and tell us when you and John were ready to start a family and what that was like.
Yeah. So we are both the oldest of our like set of siblings. So he's the oldest of 3. I'm the oldest of 4. And so I would say like not early on in our dating, but when we were started to get serious and talk about marriage and family and all that, we both decided we wanted like 3+ children. And similar to like how we grew up, we have very close relationships with each of our siblings and with each other's siblings. And so just wanted that for our children growing up. And so pretty early on in our relationship, we just kind of had that understanding that we wanted kids and not wanted them quick, but not that far off after getting married. And so I got off birth control. It was like the day after our wedding because we didn't go on our honeymoon for 2 weeks because we got married in May and I was a teacher. So I was finishing up the school year. And so just kind of took that time to like let my body like reset from birth control. And we went on our honeymoon and I naively was like, oh, I'm going to come back with like a baby on board, honeymoon baby. And then plot twist, that did not happen for us that way. We actually spent, say, the first like 6 to 7 months of our marriage just like actively trying. And I don't know if this is the older sibling like piece of me or the teacher piece of me, but I'm like a psycho planner. And so I'm like, okay, ovulation tests, I'm taking my temperature like right off the bat. Like I'm tracking this and we are like, if we're going to do this, I've got to know like every single aspect of it, which honestly could have played into part of why it didn't happen right away for us. Cause obviously you're doing all of that. You get a little bit stressed. But so we got to like the 6 to 7 month mark and I was just kind of like, I'm tracking my ovulation, these ovulation tests, like I'm hitting the peak on when I should, like we're doing everything the way we should be. I'm just going to kind of like check in with my doctor. As I always kind of thought that I was going to have a hard time getting pregnant. And I don't know why, like you could have asked me in high school and I would have been like, yeah, I kind of think that like I'm going to struggle having kids. I don't know why. I just always thought that just weird, like premonition type thing that just had a weird vibe about it. But my doctor, she's like my therapist, my PCP, my OB, like rolled into one. She's the most amazing human. And so she understands me and my anxieties. And she's like, okay, we'll just like run some like preliminary blood tests. We'll see where your AMH is at. We'll see where your hormones are. And then we'll test John and just we'll go from there, kind of ease some of your thoughts. She was like, it can take up to a year. We don't get concerned until you're at the year mark. I'm like, okay. So we go and we do all the testing, and it turns out we both have infertility. And so I have PCOS, which is a hormone imbalance that can affect your ovulation, amongst a lot of other things. And then I have a thin uterine lining. So my chances of ovulating and then actually ovulating an egg, and then John's infertility comes into play, where he has 2% of the heads of his sperm are normal shaped. And so the likelihood that, number one, I'm going to ovulate, number two, one of his normal headed shaped sperm are going to get there, not very much. And then on top of that, I have a thin uterine lining. So even if we penetrate the egg, the likelihood of it implanting into my uterus is very slim. And so my doctor was like, I'm going to be honest, this is a little bit out of my scope of what I think I can help you with. I'm going to refer you to a reproductive endocrinologist. And then, so we went, I think it was like a week later, because again, me, psycho planner, I'm like, okay, we're getting this figured out, like whatever we've got to do. And we met with the reproductive endocrinologist, and she was like, yeah, if you guys continue trying naturally how you are without the help of anything else, you have about a 1.5 to 2% chance of conceiving naturally. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? And she kind of talked it through a little bit more, but IVF was our best option for the fact that you bypass the whole like ovulation, like you're ovulating and they're collecting the egg. So you bypass my PCOS with that. Then they can sort through the male's sample in John's case, they could find his normal shaped headed sperm so that they could choose which ones to fertilize the eggs with. And then for 3, they could monitor my uterine lining with the use of like progesterone and estrogen to make sure that it could get to the thickness that we wanted it to, because naturally it doesn't. And even going through our IVF cycle, my uterus was still on the thin side, to where they were like, are we going to transfer? Should we not? And ultimately we decided to transfer, and that is what led us to our sweet Emma George. So we were very fortunate that through IVF, even though, or I guess despite my PCOS, I had 36 eggs retrieved. And from the 36 eggs, we got 9 embryos total. And so Emmett was our first embryo that we transferred, and then we froze the other 8. And so we were very fortunate that within our first cycle, we got that amount of healthy embryos, and then that our first transfer was successful with Emmett. And so the pathway to us getting pregnant was a little different than what we envisioned, but was still happened, and that we're very fortunate that we were able to be successful in that IVF journey. And so that was like Emmett's trying to conceive portion. And then as I was like kind of going through postpartum, I was like, I'm not going to take birth control, because obviously we can't have kids on our own. We only have a 1.5 to 2% chance. So I'm not going to put more hormones in my body if I don't have to. So I'm like, okay, we're good. So I wasn't on birth control or anything. And then it was like 5 months postpartum. So my periods were still kind of like all over the place. And it was 10 days late. And one of my friends was like, I think you should take a test. I'm like, no, there's no way. Like, my body's just still figuring itself out. And she's like, no, I really think you should. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then I went home that night. I was like, okay, I do have a bunch extra, so I'm just going to take one. Why not? I was literally like wearing a tampon. I had cramps. Like, I thought I was about to start my period. Never did. Took a test and it was positive. And so our 1.5 to 2% chance of a miracle baby happened, and we got pregnant naturally when Emmett was 5 months old. And so our boys are like 15 and a half months apart.
Holy cow.
Yes. So it's like
literal.
he was the little like sperm / egg / he bypassed all of those things that like everything truly did need to line up perfectly, and that did for Reed. And so that's how we were blessed with IVF miracle and a natural miracle.
Yeah.
So,
I love that for like both of them. Like I feel like they're just gonna know that they're both very special.
Yeah.
People,
One
like,
of
supposed to be here.
my favorite things, and well, it was their shared nursery for a little bit. On the wall in what's now Reed's room, we have a watercolor of Emmett's embryo picture. And so it was like the first picture we ever had of Emmett because we got to see him as an embryo. And then we have a watercolor of Reed's first ultrasound picture because that was like his first picture. And then there's like a quote that's like, mighty trees grow from little seeds. And I'm like, they each have their own like unique like origin story.
Yeah.
So
That is awesome.
vastly different, yet like each unique and special in their own way.
Yeah.
Which is very like on brand for their personalities. Like they are so different. And it just makes sense that each is their own different, just as their conception stories were. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yes. When you like found out about the low percentage of, conceiving naturally, like you said that you're like a planner and that kind of thing, but like did it like affect you emotionally?
Oh my gosh. So I saw my doctor's name flash on my phone and I like immediately like knew it wasn't good news. And I just, maybe that's like a negative viewpoint on life, but I was just like, oh, I know, like typically when they call, like it's like no news is good news. When like if you get a phone call, it's not the best. And John actually wasn't home yet. And so she called me and was like talking me through some of it. And I was just kind of like numb almost to a point because it's odd because half of me was devastated because you just found out you can't have children on your own and you're going to need to do the super expensive procedure to have a family. And the thing that I've always wanted to be was a mom. Was a mom. But so half of me was devastated. The other half of me was almost not grateful, but like, oh, okay, there's a reason. Like, okay, there's something to aim towards fixing. Whereas when we were kind of in the limbo of trying and things weren't happening, not knowing, that I think that was harder for me because there wasn't a concrete explanation for it. So I've always said I think an unexplained infertility diagnosis would have been harder for my like planner brain to grasp versus them saying, okay, this, like, there's a reasoning behind it. This is what's wrong. But here are our steps to fix it. So I think knowing that, well, and not necessarily fix, not because it was broken, but here's how we can help. And this is the best, like course of action for you to have your family. I think that helped a little bit, just knowing that there were options, that it was something that, okay, yes, maybe this isn't going to happen with just like the two of you, but when we talked to our doctor and I was just kind of like, I'm a numbers type of person. If you could just like be honest, like, yeah, you said we have a 2% chance of having kids on our own, but what's our percent of success? Should we do IUI or should we do IVF? And I think IUI, she said, bumped us up to like a 15% chance. Just because with IUI, they're assisting like getting the sperm to where it needs to be, but there was no guarantee that it would be the correct sperm and no necessarily guarantee that I would ovulate, even with like the use of Clomid or other ovulation inducing medications. But then the IVF, she was like, it gives you about a 75 to 80% chance. And I was like, okay, in my brain, like 2%, 15 to an 80%. I'm like, okay, if we're going to be paying all this money, might as well put the money towards what's going to give us the 80%. And so we definitely had a period of like sadness where John and I would just like cried together. And it was, and I can't tell his story, but I think for him as a man, it was kind of hard to grasp because this is what we're supposed to be able to do. You're supposed to be able to like be a father and be a mother. And it's just what humans are supposed to be able to do on their own. And the fact that it wasn't like that we weren't able to was just kind of, there was a moment of sadness. But I think as we kind of shifted our mindset into full force into IVF and that this is what we're going to do and we're going to be strong through it. And this is just how we're going to, like how our family is going to start, kind of made it easier is that we were in it together rather than like pitting us against each other type of thing. So if anything, it made us stronger and in our marriage and in our relationship just was that I would say it would be the most broken we had been together, just sad and not hopeless, but like not what we thought it would be. And so just knowing that you could only go up from there just helped us become stronger together.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate. He was like my rock throughout it all, helped give me shots, and like was like, is there anything I can do for you? How can I help you? And was just like very steadfast throughout it all. So
Yeah.
it was awesome.
That's amazing that you found a provider or even had a provider for so long that would do these tests for you.
Oh, yeah.
So early.
Yes, because and part of me was also like, had I had a doctor that was like, no, you're young, like you have to wait until the year mark, it would have been just more wasted time for us because there wasn't anything happening. And I do get that society can make it seem like a pregnancy just happens like that. Like on Mean Girls, you're gonna have sex, you're gonna get pregnant, and that's it. But there is also the side of it that those tests are so easy to do. It's a blood test and a semen analysis. So if there are couples that are a few months in and that would just like to have the test done just for peace of mind, I don't think it's very invasive. And so I get the like waiting until the year mark, but I also get that there are these tests, whether it's covered by insurance or not, it was not crazy expensive, that if that's going to help identify people that could be struggling further on, why waste the time? But that's just my viewpoint of it. So,
yeah. I feel like as pregnant people or mothers, we have to advocate for ourselves so much. But all the infertility journeys that we've heard, like they've had to advocate even more.
There are so many hoops to jump through, and I am very fortunate. Dr. Renee Stein, she's my girl. She is awesome. She knows me, and she knew that I was going to be consistently worried about it until we figured out if there was a reason on why it wasn't happening, or if I really did just need to like calm down and like let it be. But in our case, there was a reason why it wasn't happening, and it just would have been prolonged had we not done those initial tests. So,
and every negative test, it's just so disappointing.
Every month, you're just like hoping and praying and like holding a test up to the light, like, oh, do I see a second line? And then it's just each month that passes, it just adds on the worry and the sadness, and it's a lot to go through. And especially, we were some of the first like out of our group of friends to like start trying to have a baby, so I didn't really feel like I necessarily had anybody that I could like talk to or be like, hey, I know they're also going through this. And so it was kind of isolating, and I think that's a big part of why I was very open about our IVF journey. And I'm an open book. Anybody could ask me any question. I'm like, yeah, this is what medication I was on. This was what my cervical fluid was like all of that. I'm like a hugely open book about all things fertility, baby, motherhood. And it's just because it's not talked about enough. And had I had someone to talk about it when I was going through it, it maybe wouldn't have felt so like, not that it was shameful by any means, but not a lot of people necessarily talked about it. But I think our generation is one that it's becoming more talked about. And I could name like 6 or 7 other people that I know that have had to do IVF. And so I think just more people are bringing awareness to it, and that that's just another way to get your family.
Yeah. I mean, I remember asking questions even like 2 years ago when like my interest was continuously like growing into like motherhood and fertility, and like knowing that you guys had Emmett through IVF. I remember asking you questions. You know, you are an open book, like you said. So it was really nice to get that understanding. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much that you went through that I wouldn't have known about.
Yeah, it's a whole process, just from like the initial like appointments to like the hormones and like the egg retrievals. It's like in my brain chunks of like IVF, so it's like shots and retrieval process, and then like the transfer and preparation process and monitoring for all of that. And there's just so much that goes into it. But while it is a tough thing to go through, I think the end goal helps you kind of put it into perspective. Like my whole time was like, I'm doing this like for our family, I'm doing this for our future children. And that made it easier to kind of grin and bear it per se. But I mean, I went from being someone whose mother had to like hold their hand while they got a flu shot to being able to give myself like intramuscular progesterone shots. Like I was petrified of needles. And then I was just kind of like, you know what, you've got to do this and you got to figure it out. And I did. So
some perseverance.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how was pregnancy?
Oh my God, I hated being pregnant. Like you would think after going through all the infertility and you're like, yes, finally pregnant. No. Oh my, I think that anybody who says they enjoy pregnancy, and I apologize if it's either one of you, like they're lying. There's like, it's weird now to like look back on, because there are moments where I get like nostalgic for pregnancy. Like I'll get a random gas bubble and it feels like a kick. And I'm like, no, like it's not a baby. I kind of miss that. But when I am pregnant, I am one of those people that I gain 60 pounds no matter what I do. So one of my pregnancies, I did not work out at all, did not eat healthy, ate whatever I want, gained 60 pounds. So the next time I was like, okay, I'm going to be fit. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to work out this whole pregnancy. I'm going to eat my healthy foods. Still gained 60 pounds. So it's like, yes. So I gain all of the weight. I have the worst heartburn. I have heartburn naturally. Like I can't have red sauce or onions. I get heartburn. So when I'm pregnant, I have to literally sleep propped up because I was like having acid like come through my nose. That's how bad my heartburn was. And then I have to be on prescription nausea meds. For my first pregnancy, the whole pregnancy I was on it. My second pregnancy, I finally got to wean off about third trimester. So I was on prescription nausea meds the whole time. When I was pregnant with Emmett, I got a DVT blood clot from my pelvis to my knee. So that was,
scary.
yeah, it was terrifying. And that,
Like, feel it or see it? Or...
So I woke up one morning and my left leg was like a Frankenstein leg. It was purple and like 3 times the size. And my mom's in healthcare, so I FaceTime her and I'm like, she's like, you have a blood clot. I'm like, so do I need to get a sub today or what? Like, what do I need to do? She's like, yeah, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like okay.
Wow.
Yes. And so, yeah, pregnancy is not glorious or blissful for me, but I would do it all again in a heartbeat to get my sweet boys. But I was not the blissful pregnant person in the least bit. So between, blood clots, nausea, hormonal migraines, and I had boys, but they still stole my beauty. I feel like 'cause I had like the driest skin. And so pregnancy didn't agree with me, but there are times, and I think it's because we've decided our family is complete, that like I look back on it with fondness, but when I'm in the moment, not so much.
Yeah.
So I think the blood clot was the hardest part of either one of the pregnancies.
Yeah.
Oh, and I also had my pubic bones separated. I had SPD. I forget the full, it's like symphysis pubic dysfunction, where your like ligaments don't hold your pubic bones together as much as they should, so it's separated. So it was super painful to walk. Luckily my chiropractor helped fix that. But yeah, someone once told me, Alissa, you have a lot of problems. And she was right. I did. I had so many problems, especially in pregnancy. It was like, there was, like one thing after another. But the scariest was definitely the blood clot and not knowing whether or not that would impact Emmett's health or my health.
Did they have to give you a blood thinner?
Yeah. So I was 35 weeks pregnant when I woke up with the Frankenstein leg and the blood clot. So I had to start on a blood thinner immediately. And it was, it wasn't heparin, Lovenox. So had to do the injections, which is it's a subcutaneous injection. So you have to do it like in your stomach or like your arm. And the arms were weird for me, but it was also very weird giving myself a shot in my stomach while I was pregnant. Like, I'm like, I know this needle can't reach you, but that it was just so odd and foreign. So I had to be on blood thinners the last part of pregnancy, and then they stopped me right before my C-section. So Emmett was also breech. And so since he was breech and I had the blood clot, we didn't want to attempt to turn him. So we're scheduled a C-section. I will never forget. They called me and gave me my C-section date. His due date was November 28th. So in my brain, I was like, he's gonna be a Sagittarius. Like the whole time I'm pregnant, I'm a weird like zodiac person. But I'm like, I'm having a Sagittarius baby. Like this is great. Like Sagittarius are sweet. Like we'll vibe together. And then they call me and schedule my C-section, and they schedule it for November 21st, which is like the last day of Scorpio. And I am just bawling at the kitchen table. John comes home and he's like, is everything okay with the baby? What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm like, he's gonna be a Scorpio. He's like, I can't right now. And I'm like, it was a very real like fear for hormonal Alissa, because I was just so emotional about my plans for birth. I had always said I don't care how he comes as long as he gets here like healthy, but throwing the blood clot into the mix, not knowing whether or not he even like through a C-section, if he would be okay, if I would be okay, like that fear of that unknown, and just throw it all on top of he's not going to be a Sagittarius. It was just too much for me to handle. But
were you like, can we change that?
yeah, so my doctor was like, I mean, we can, but I only do C-sections on Thursdays. So like if you want it to be me, then we're going to have to go with that date. And in the grand scheme of things, it would have been that date anyways, because I woke up at like 3 a.m. on November 21st and my water broke. So I went into labor on that date anyways. So we were scheduled for the C-section. We were supposed to go in around 11 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up at 3. And you guys know, like third trimester, there's a lot of fluids everywhere. Like you're wearing a panty liner most of the time anyways. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought I just had like normal discharge. So I just changed my underwear. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go pee, whatever. Fell back asleep, woke up, and like my second pair of underwear were soaked. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I put on another pair. And then after like the third pair, I'm like, maybe my water's like leaking or my water's breaking. So I wake John up and I'm like, hey, I'm in labor. He's like, what? And like freaked out, like rushed to the hospital because we didn't know with my blood clot, like what a labor would entail. And so, everything just kind of pivoted to earlier in the day. We were very lucky my doctor was coming in that time anyways. And so, called my mom and his parents, and everybody kind of like came up to the hospital and like, okay,
Pre-COVID.
yes, right. Very odd that like all of those people could be there. But my mom works at Mercy, so she kind of knew a lot of the people on the floor and stuff, and she was working anyway, so she just kind of like came up in between things. So they kind of fast forwarded or like sped up what would have been, I guess, a normal C-section preparation so we could get that in. But because I had the blood clot and because of where it was on my pelvis and how Emmett was sitting, they were very afraid that when they took him out that the blood clot could move to either like my heart or lungs. And so no one was allowed in my OR. So my husband had to miss Emmett's birth. And I felt like the worst. I'm like, me and my blood clot are the reason why you can't see your son be born. And so it was literally me and my doctor, Renee Stein, who is a phenomenal woman, who like got me through my C-section. But that was part of the reason why I refer to Emmett's birth as a traumatic experience, just because not the fact that it was a C-section, not the fact that there was a blood clot, but the fact that I was alone, like that my support system like couldn't be there. And now reflecting back, knowing that I probably could have advocated for myself more, like what would have happened had I been like, no, I'm not having this baby unless my husband's in this room? Like, what would they have said at that point? Or I was like, hey, I'm peacing out. I'm going to Mobap. Like, what would they have said? But, and I do get it because I every doctor said that he could be in there except for the anesthesiologist for some reason, but I guess that they kind of run the OR. I didn't really know that. I figured the surgeon would, but it was the anesthesiologist who said no, because he said in the time that it would take for us to tell you to get out of the room if your wife is coding, that could be like life or death of like if they had to like take the time to tell him to leave, that like it would have taken away time from me and the baby. But
Didn't you tell me too that you couldn't deliver in like an OR?
So I wasn't in the
labor and delivery
OR. I was in like the main OR of the hospital because I number one, I think it's bigger, so there are more people in there, like more teams of people. And number two, I think for the access to whatever they needed should the blood clot have moved. Yeah. So I'm like going into this C-section by myself, like, okay, bye guys. Like, don't know if I'll see you later or not. And it was literally terrifying. And I think my brain kind of blocked some of it out. Like I remember a lot of it, but parts of it, I think just like my brain just doesn't have, there's like bits and pieces. But I remember they delivered him and they showed him to me and I'm like, oh, he's beautiful. And then I'm like, okay, so am I going to know if this blood clot's moving? Like, am I going to feel anything? Like how much time has passed? And I remember like looking at my doctor. I'm like, so are we good? She's like, we're good. Like, you're okay. And I'm like, okay, like thanks. But fun fact about the Mercy like main OR is they barely have cell service in there. And so they had told like my husband and my mom and everyone, they had like sent pictures from my phone, like, hey, he's here. Like all is good. But service sucked there, so they didn't get it. So they thought that like my C-section was taking way longer. My mom's like apparently pacing, like, oh my God, something went wrong. Like, I don't think she's okay. And so finally, like one of the doctors went out and told everyone that like, it's all good. Like he's here. And yeah, it was a lot, but, I will never forget so as much as I wish John could have been in the room to obviously see Emmett be born, I will never forget the look on his face as we're like being wheeled down to the hallway to like greet him, like, this is your son. And so that is a special moment, but it was hard him not being there. And I felt like I inadvertently, not that I like wanted a blood clot or anything, but that like I took a piece away from him. So that was a whole nother like level of processing that like I had to figure out postpartum, which is a whole nother monster of itself. But so
there's so much guilt too, like our bodies, we think they're failing, air quotes, but it's, I don't know why we hold on to that guilt so much.
Yes. I went through a lot of my like, number one, he was breech. I'm like, okay, why is he breech? Is he not comfortable in there? Why is he like pivoted the other way? And then the blood clot, I'm like, I just felt that my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And I was like, if that blood clot moves, like that's could potentially take away a wife, a mother, like it could. And it was just insane to think about that. Like our bodies can, not that they work against us by any means, but like you're supposed to be supporting and nurturing this pregnancy. And then no, my body's just over here making deep vein thrombosis. Like, so, but we moved past it. My left leg still swells a little bit sometimes, but we're good. Yeah. So, and then in my second pregnancy, I had to be on blood thinners the entire time. I actually had more needles from my pregnancy with Reed and just the blood thinners than I did IVF and the blood thinners from Emmett's pregnancy combined, because it was 8 weeks when I found out, from 8 weeks all the way through, like, it was 32 weeks of shots that I had to do daily with Reed.
Wow.
Yeah. So
was it to like kind of like counteract the process of possibly getting another?
So I went through like a whole panel, like a blood clot or a clotting disorder panel, and I don't have any clotting disorder. So they just said that it must have been hormone induced. So obviously estrogen can cause blood clots, and that's one of the big risks with like birth control. And so that when my body is producing more of that hormone on its own, I'm at increased risk. And so when I'm pregnant, I take the blood thinner to prevent clots from forming. And then the area where I had my clot before has like residual damage in the, I guess it's a vein or artery, a vein, yes, deep vein thrombosis. So the vein that the clot was on has damage from it. And so when I was pregnant with Reed, it was, I think, like late first trimester, my left leg started swelling, and I immediately was like PTSD, like, oh my God, do I have another blood clot? Like, what do I do? Went to the doctor, and they were like, no, you just have like that vein for things to pass through. It's already like smaller because there's damage there from before. So you'll have a little bit more swelling on that leg, but not necessarily another clot. But the doctor said that my blood clot was one of the biggest that they had seen, because it went from like my hip bone and my pelvis all the way to like the top of my knee. It was huge. And I still have like creepy like spider veins like from it, like on my abdomen and like different parts. It's so wild. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. I remember your Facebook, like when you posted about that, and I was just like, what?
Yeah.
My eyes were so big, and I remember like texting Hannah if you were okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like everyone in pregnancy, especially in the third trimester, talks about like high blood pressure and headaches and like the warning signs for all of those things. And I really don't feel like I had been educated on like, hey, blood clots are a very real thing that can happen. And like, this is what you need to look out for. And because I mean, swelling is a very common part of pregnancy, but I was not expecting my left leg to be 3 times the size, and like my right leg was just normal.
Yeah.
And then I had to wear like full length compression on the left side. I was maid of honor in my sister's wedding, like a week and a half after I found out my blood clot. So I was like, oh my God, a day of like pulling my whole compression stocking on, like on a crutch for like part of it. I'm like, George, I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to take any attention away from you. I promise. But looking back on it, it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, I was at the beginning when they first found it. It was really painful, which I didn't like think of, but when everything's like swollen and pushing against it. But thankfully, once I started on the blood thinners, it wasn't nearly as bad. But I couldn't even walk on that leg after, like, once it started getting like purple and very Frankenstein like and hot. So
not only going through IVF at 24, 25, however old we were.
Yeah.
Plus getting a blood clot. Like, I don't even know.
Yes.
You went through so much alone. And I think that's like why I look up to you.
Well, thank you.
You have the answers for everything.
Well, in the moment, it was just like, this is what I have to do to like get to my baby. And part of me, I think that's why, because I've had a lot of people say, oh, like, you're so strong, you did IVF, or you're so strong, like, you had a blood clot and you had a C-section by yourself. And in my brain, it was just, this is what I have to do to get to my baby, to have like a healthy baby in my arms. And so I didn't feel strong like in the moment. But now looking back, well, like, even when like you say something like that, I'm like, yeah, damn, that's a lot. Like, but
we were so young.
Yes. And
you're 3 months older than me, and you went through a ton.
Yeah, I was just terrified to be alone during the C-section. And so I think that's part of what makes Reed's birth story like so cathartic and healing for me, because it was like just John and I. And so that's, I think, what, I can imagine. Yeah. So, but after I had Emmett, it was like none of that even mattered, like blood clot, C-section by itself. It was just like, okay, he's here, and this is what I did all of that for. And so, but I do think the blood clot played a bigger part in postpartum. Just after like going through postpartum twice now, reflecting on each of those experiences. So postpartum with Emmett, I still couldn't even really walk because of not only the C-section, but the blood clot in my leg, and swelling post C-section is even worse. So I felt like my leg got worse before it got better, because there's so much fluid in your body anyways. And so I slept on my couch for, I think it was like the first 2 weeks of Emmett's life because our bed was too high up that I couldn't like climb into our bed. So like we have a ranch, and because I know you talked about sleeping on the couch because you have like different level, but that I slept on the couch because I couldn't get into our bed. And so I was very fortunate. My mom came and stayed with us, and I just will never forget like bawling my eyes out when she's like, okay, I'm gonna like go now. I can't do this. I can't even walk. Like, how am I? And granted, at that time, my blood clot had gotten better, and I could, but it was just I felt like I had a lot of taking care of myself to do, and then to have to take care of a baby on top of it, it was just a lot. And I naturally have high anxiety, as we heard during my trying to conceive time, but postpartum hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think a big factor into that was if I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm going to breastfeed, and I'm going to breastfeed until he's a year old, and I'm going to be amazing at it. Like after my C-section, like he didn't even get cleaned off. He was immediately like placed on my chest because I'm like, we're doing skin to skin immediately. I'm still getting that golden hour experience. Like I had the clear drape. I like was able to see everything because I was like, even if I'm having a C-section, I'm still going to have a bond with my baby. Yeah. And in the back of my head, majority of that was like, I'm going to have this bond so that we can breastfeed and everything's going to like go off without a hitch. And then he latched somewhat in the hospital, but I feel like the lactation consultants that I had were kind of like really pushy, and I had no idea what I was doing. And my mom didn't breastfeed, so she didn't really know like, oh, this is what you should do. You should hold him this way. And so there was a lot of anxiety going home surrounding that. And then we found out, I think it was right around 2 weeks old, Emmett had a lip tie and a tongue tie. And so that explained why breastfeeding hadn't been working for us, because he wasn't getting a good latch, and then my supply wasn't coming in well. And so he had his lip tie and tongue tie lasered, and we were working through that. But then I switched to pumping, which spiked my anxiety even worse. And I think it was the scheduling of it, because so there was a point in time where we were triple feeding. So I was breastfeeding or attempting to breastfeed, and then he was still screaming hungry. So then I would pump. We would feed him what I pumped, and then he was still hungry. And then so we would feed him with formula. And by the time we got through all of that, it was time for him to like eat again. And so then I just switched to pumping, but I became like obsessed with like the amount of ounces that I was getting, and like the fact that he was sleeping longer chunks, but I was still having to wake up to like pump. And then I still, even though I was on the strict schedule of pumping, I wasn't getting that much. And we didn't have the best start because of his latch. And I was taking all the supplements, eating all the things. And I just remember being in his nursery, like sobbing. And my mom was like, you don't have to do this. Like if it's going to ease your anxiety to not, and just to give him formula, you can do that. And I'm like crying to her. I'm like, really? She's like, yes. Like, she was like, you had formula and you're just fine. She was like, if you do want to continue to pump and breastfeed, I will support you fully in that. But if you want to take a break and give him formula, you can. And I guess it hadn't like dawned on me until that moment where she and John like sat down with me, and they're like, we're like, because I don't know why in my head I was like, John wants me to breastfeed, like he wants me to give his child what's like best for him. And he's like, I don't care what he eats as long as he's eating. And I'm like, okay. And so I think the decision to stop breastfeeding and pumping really helped ease my anxiety, because then I was also able to start my anxiety meds again, because I didn't have to worry about it in the breast milk. But just, I think the rigidness that I set myself up for with like, you have to do this, and then the rigidness of pumping, it just spiked my anxiety. And so I remember the first time John got to feed him a like bottle of formula, it was just like a wave of relief. It was like, oh, 'cause I felt disconnected from Emmett almost when I was having to pump, because it was like, especially during that triple feeding, it was like, we're trying to figure out this breastfeeding, and like, he wasn't latching. He was still upset. I was upset because it wasn't working. And then I would have to pump, and then we'd have to feed him that bottle, and then we'd have to feed him formula like on top of that. And I just felt like everyone else was getting to do some of the feeding parts, because then I was pumping. I'm like, I can't hold you while I'm hooked up to a pump and like trying to figure all of this out. And I almost felt more disconnected with him. I'm like, this is not the breastfeeding that everybody talks about loving. This is not the like bond that people talk about. And so I remember when I got to feed him his first formula bottle, just like getting to snuggle him close and like feeling calm about it. And I'm like, okay, this is peaceful for me. So this is what's going to work for us. And so really just that pivotal moment of like, you're his mom. You can decide what's going to work best for you, and kind of coming to the realization of that. It's like, as a new mom, you're getting all of these pieces of advice thrown at you from like different directions. And it's, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, okay, that's fine too. It's whatever works. And as long as within safety measures, like if anyone was putting their child in danger, I'd be like, no, sorry. But, if it works for you, great, then that's what works for you. And you're figuring out this whole new human being. You're figuring out yourself as a whole new human being, because moms are a whole new person as well. And so I think taking the advice from people with kind of like a grain of salt, like, yes, I'll try that. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't, it's okay to try and like do other things. And I think that was a big realization for me postpartum, is that it's okay if certain things don't go the way that you like thought they were going to.
Yeah.
So very true.
Yeah. You guys were like on the same thing, like 90 later. Like, exactly.
That was us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like, I like giving myself permission to stop pumping.
Yes.
Or to start formula. It was just like, such a relief.
Yes.
And like, why is it so hard for us to give ourselves that permission?
To do
what
guilt
works for us?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's society or what we've been kind of told that like mom should do, like breast is best. And yes, I get that, but also a healthy mom is what's best for a baby. And so it's truly whatever works for you. If breastfeeding and pumping come naturally to you and you have a good supply and that's what you can give your baby, then that's phenomenal. But if it's not working, or even if you don't want to, that is a valid enough reason as well. Like I remember like when he had his lip tie and tongue tie, I'm like, oh, well, that's why it's not working. Okay, yes, like this is what I can say for like why this breastfeeding's not working. And it really shouldn't like have to be that way. It's just, even if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so
I remember being like, we're taking a break. And that break turned into we're not.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Even with Reed, we just started with formula like right off the bat, because he also had a lip tie and tongue tie, because they are genetic apparently, and I did not know that. And I think I had a lip tie and tongue tie that I've kind of been like, I can't do the fun like Spanish rolling your R's thing. Like, but so just right off the bat with him, I was like, I told all of the nurses, I was like, we're not breastfeeding. I would not like lactation to like come in here, and that's just my choice. And they were all phenomenal about it. I was so worried that like I was going to get judged, or people were going to be like, no, I should just try. And everybody at Mercy was phenomenal. They were like, what kind of formula do you want? We'll bring it in, and like making sure it was restocked, and they were awesome. And I think with Reed, just knowing that was the decision we had made to start off, like that was what his journey was going to be. And I just didn't even feel the pressure to try and to like attempt it. It took a lot of the anxiety off. Because it was just that whole level of like guilt wasn't even there. It was just, okay, I know that this is what works for me as a mom, and this is what worked for my babies. And he actually had a lactose sensitivity. He had to be on a like lactose-free formula. Like I wouldn't have been able to go dairy-free, so like that wouldn't have worked in the grand scheme of things. But I can only imagine. I mean, I've had friends who completely eliminated different things out of their diet, and it just that's a whole nother level of stress that would have, and anxiety that would have been in my life, and it would not have worked. And especially Reed being a second child while trying to chase around a 15-month-old, I just don't think like anything but formula would have worked for us in that situation. And so I'm very fortunate that we did not have the formula shortage when I had my babies, because I know that now that is a whole nother added level of stress if you do choose to formula feed. But I think it's getting somewhat better, but I'm not.
And I know they're importing more and more, and then the FDA is approving more. Like smaller company.
Yes, and I saw some of the some of like the European brands and stuff like that had been getting more easily available here.
Yeah, I follow the Formula Mom. On Instagram, and she's always like, "Okay, let's see what's the target today."
Yeah,
you know, it's so wild. I think we stopped it like right before everything kind of started to happen, and I just remember being like, "Whew." We got out of that one.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how, but we did.
Benji was like right at the tail end of it. I remember he was like 10 and a half, 11 months old. And Hannah's like, I mean, if I can't find formula, do you think I can give him milk?
Yeah.
Yes. He is almost one. I think he will be okay.
Yeah.
And Georgia, who is coming on next week with Cam, he had a really rough start with feeding and even finding like the correct formula. And I remember like every single time going to the store, like, if I saw Georgia's and Cam's brand, I was like stocking up on it.
Yeah.
Like, but then you also feel bad if you're like stockpiling against, like, I'm like, if there are other people, like I'll leave like a few bottles, but like I know Cam needs it.
But she's your sister.
Right. Yes. And so hopefully that won't be an issue going forward. And then the supply chain with all of that is getting figured out. Cause
that's just the whole dynamic of. And I won't go into it too much, but just the whole breast is best thing. Like, see, that's why. Like, you can just naturally get from milk. And it's like, well, okay.
No, not everybody can. But thanks. Yeah.
And I was going to kind of like speak onto this. Like, you like the bond that you get from breastfeeding. It's like you just said it perfectly. Like you were able to cuddle him when you were formula feeding him. And like, that's the bond that grew.
Yes, 100%. I was calmer and he wasn't like, babies can pick up on your anxiety so easily.
Yes,
and
they can.
That was probably a huge factor of why, along with his latch not working, like I was anxious about it and he wasn't comfortable. I wasn't comfortable. And it was, a whole thing. But I feel like there are so many people that judge women for breastfeeding in public, but I feel like I also got judgment from like giving him a bottle. The amount of people that like gave me dirty looks if I would like mix his formula in public, like I'm like, nobody is happy with anything. It's like, if I whip my boob out right now, you wouldn't be happy. If I whip a bottle out, you're not happy. Like, would you like to feed him? Like, it's just, everybody has an opinion on motherhood and it's crazy. It's like when you're pregnant, you hear it. And then when you're a new mom, you hear it. Like when will the opinions stop? Do they ever stop? From random strangers. It's not even like people in my life. It would be like random people who feel like they need to voice their opinion. So
I remember like taking Wes out to this restaurant when he was like 3 weeks old and like my aunt was in town and whatever. So my aunt comes up to me and she's like, how are you going to feed him? I'm like, I'm going to breastfeed him. Like, cause that's what we were doing. Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to breastfeed him. And she's like, well, how are you going to do it? I'm like, what do you mean? How am I going to do it? I'm like, she's like, well, what will happen if somebody says something? I'll say, fuck off.
Right. Exactly. Like,
and she's like, cool. So will I.
I love it. But at the end of the day, there are no, like, your opinion is not welcome. I did not ask for it. I need a shirt on that. I need a shirt that says, like, your opinion is not welcome. Because
really everything, though. I mean, you still get it. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, when are you going to turn the car seat around? And I'm like,
yes.
None of your business.
Yeah. I get a lot of, so Emmett he's been in speech therapy and he's made leaps and bounds, but I would got like, oh, he's not talking yet. And I'm like, no, but thanks.
Yeah.
Like, you're a random stranger. Even if he was talking, I'm not sure he would want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's just parenthood and motherhood is one thing I think everyone feels entitled to an opinion on. And I don't know why or when that will ever change.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't try to give unsolicited advice to people. Like, if they ask, I'll talk to you at the park and I'll talk about my kid and my experiences, but I'm not going to just thrust it on you for no reason.
Right.
So,
Like going up to a stranger, like how weird.
right.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll change with our generation as we phase out some others.
Yeah, we're all just at the playground, like awkwardly looking at They're like, you want to be my friend?
Oh. Okay. So,
And I think social media adds like another layer to it. Because then like not only are you getting things from the outside, you're also putting things into the inside. And then you're like, fuck, like I should be doing this and I should be doing
oh
that.
my gosh.
That's how I felt. I need to get off of it, but I also
Yeah, no, but it's the comparison. Comparison truly is the like thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with Georgia when she was postpartum, and she was like, there was someone who had a baby around like the same time that she did. And she was like, look at them, like they're doing so great. So I literally went to my Facebook and I pulled up what I had posted when I was postpartum, and I said, okay, Georgia, here's what I posted. Like, you think I look great, right? And she's like, yeah, like you did fine. And then I pulled up a photo that I took of me crying as I was rocking Emmett, that like I literally was a hot freaking mess. And I was like, this was my reality. I was like, what everyone was posting online is not their reality. I was like, I was guilty of it. Like, and maybe that's why you think that I was winging this whole motherhood thing, is because I don't let a lot of people see that side of me always, but that's the real and the raw. And so when I had Reed, I posted like, yes, like the cute image, but literally I also posted like, this is truly what postpartum, like day 3 at home with 2 under 2 looks like. And I had not showered. I had no makeup on. There were bags under my eyes. I had no bra on. I was still wearing a diaper. Like this is the real. This is it. And I think that's the aspect of motherhood that more people need to talk about and showcase, and which is why I think that this podcast is so phenomenal, because you get all the different stories and you get the people that talk about their experiences, and it's just more of like the real and the raw, and not the like blitzed and glamorized social media version of everyone's life.
Yeah.
So,
John was living with 3 people in diapers.
named all of them. You have a baby, like, oh, but plug into this. Always Discreet Boutique I used during both my pregnancies.
Fantastic.
So when my water was leaking with Emmett, and it didn't fully break until we were at the hospital, and so I wore a diaper on the way to the hospital because I was just still leaking through everything. Then I wore them postpartum, so that's like one of my go-tos for baby shower gifts now. I make a basket like for the mom. Yes. And it's like, okay, everyone's getting you stuff that you're going to need for the baby, but no one's getting you stuff that you're going to need for yourself. And so I like do C-section and vaginal birth things, and I'm like, if you use it, great. If not, pass it on to somebody else that's like, this is for you, and this is what you're gonna need. And I put in a cute little basket to put like on the back of their toilet, or like underneath in a little cabinet, because it's like just easy to have it all right there.
What's a Discreet Boutique?
So it's like adult diapers, but it's like they're made with like more of like a discreet like underwear like feel, so they're not as like, you don't feel like, I mean, it still feels like an adult diaper, but it was more comfortable for me than like the massive pads with like the mesh underwear. So I brought those.
I loved those, and for my second pregnancy I would use those and then just change out the pad inside so I could get more wear.
Yes, I did that too.
Yeah, that got, if it got dirty.
Yes,
it was like an extra layer.
And then I had those like the pad sickle like ice packs, and so I'm like, okay, I can put that in there and feel like even if it melts a little bit, like it's good, the diaper's gonna catch it. But they were definitely, and I wore them post C-section because they came up high like over my scar too, so it was nice because it didn't like cut into anything, and it was still comfortable, and felt secure.
Those things are awesome. I just have to tell a funny story that Sam had like the diaper party, and his best friend Tom brought over adult diapers instead of like baby diapers for kicks and gigs.
On purpose?
On purpose. He brought them over and I'm like, I'm actually going to keep these just in case. They were definitely not discreet. But I decided to go to the park at 38 weeks pregnant and I couldn't like not hold my pee.
Uh-huh.
And so I put one on and like walked with Ruby. And I'm like, I'm wearing this diaper so I don't have to like take a bathroom break. But I refuse to like go to the bathroom.
Like actively pee in the diaper.
Yeah, because I'm a grown woman.
Right.
Oh, yeah. But they came in handy postpartum.
I was fully prepared to use them postpartum. And then when my water was leaking and I didn't know what to do, John was like, get the diaper. And I'm like, okay. And so,
It's genius.
yes.
Yeah, leaking all over the house.
Oh, yes. And I didn't realize that, like, people talk about a water leak, but I didn't think, like, to me, a leak seems like just like a little bit, but no, it was like it was a steady leak. And then when they put us in a room for me to get like changed into the gown and everything, I like bent over and then my water broke all over the floor. Oh. And of course, John's like, I think we need a wet floor sign over here. I'm like, oh my God, that was not the time for jokes. But yeah, both my boys put me into labor at 39 weeks exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us for Alissa's birth story. That was part 1, and part 2 will be released next week, where she goes into her second birth story, more about her fertility journey and what she plans to do with her embryos, as well as postpartum breastfeeding issues and postpartum anxiety. You definitely don't want to miss part 2. And we'll put links to connect with Alissa and us as well in the show notes. And go and check out our newly revamped website at goldenhourbirthpodcast.com. We worked really hard on it and we're really proud of it. Also, please go and rate and review us on whatever you're listening to us on right now. And we'll just see you next week. Thanks. Bye.